Hello and welcome back to Spring Boot tutorial. Today we'll be discussing Spring Boot Actuator. Monitoring the health of running application and ability to apply some runtime changes to your application are very important. Spring Boot includes a number of additional features to help you monitor and manage your application when you push it to production. You can choose to monitor and manage your application using HTTP endpoints, or you can use JMX. Auditing, health, and metrics gathering can also be automatically applied to your application. Okay, so what is our objective today? Today we'll be looking at the definition of actuator, what it really means, okay, in real world, and why it has this particular term has been used by Spring. Okay, that's quite interesting. What we're gonna see, and we have a very interesting workshop. We'll be enabling actuator. Like all other videos, this is completely hands-on video. We'll be starting from scratch. We'll be adding our dependency and then making necessary changes to enable actuator and see how it really works. Okay, we'll be enabling actuator. We'll be looking at endpoints, both HTTP and JMX. We'll be looking at loggers. Okay, how you can change logging at runtime. Okay, also we'll be looking at metrics, auditing, and HTTP tracing. So first thing first, what is actually actuator means? An actuator is actually a manufacturing term that refers to a mechanical device for moving or controlling something. Does it make sense? This is exactly what Spring Boot Actuator does. It can help you to monitor and control your application. Right? Okay, actuators can generate a large amount of motion from a small change. What does it mean? Means, let's say from Spring Boot applications perspective, you can make a very tiny change, runtime change, but impact can be huge, right? Suppose you enabled some sort of logging from error to debug or trace. You are generating huge amount of data, and it has a big side effect on your application. That's just one example. Okay, you can make many other changes, okay, and it can have a huge impact on your application. Right, workshop. First thing, we would like to enable actuator in an existing Spring Boot application. So what you have to do, let's just head back to our IntelliJ. What you need to do, first thing, you like to add a dependency, Maven dependency. Okay, and this is the dependency we need to add into our application. Okay, group ID is org spring framework.boot, and as you know, Spring Framework follows a very a template or convention when it creates the libraries or frameworks. Okay, so this is because this is native from Spring Boot, so it says Spring Boot, and I'm going to use starter. As you know, starter is basically a collection of libraries, so you don't have to pick and choose, right? Because actuator itself depends on several things internally, so everything has been packaged into starter. So this is a Spring Boot starter followed by actuator. This is the actual library of framework which we are going to use. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's the only thing you have to add. And if you start your application, okay, so what you want to do is, now you go back to a browser. Okay, this is how you're going to access your HTTP endpoints. I am going to use Postman because it's easier to kind of access REST endpoints and visualize JSON. So what you need to do is simply you say localhost, this is the port where my application is running, and /actuator. So if I hit that, it's basically telling me what are all the endpoints available. And right now we can see actuator itself, okay, plus actuator /health, and if there is a some sort of component which is giving health of your application, that can also be accessed. You must be wondering that I promise, Spring Boot Actuator can do so many things. It can give information about your application, and you can do metrics, you can do logger, but I only see health over here. Here is the interesting thing. By default, only health is enabled for security reasons or for various other reasons. As far as JMX is concerned, everything is enabled by default. How do we check? Let's just open. So how do you actually access the JMX. So what you can do is you can use JProfiler or you can use JConsole, which comes free with your JDK. So I'm going to use JConsole over here. So if I just hit JConsole, okay, sorry, I'm gonna actually hit use JConsole. So let's open command prompt. Okay, if I just say JConsole, here is my JConsole launched over here. I personally prefer JProfiler because it's a good product. You know, it does so many things, but just for demonstration purposes, because not everybody will have JProfiler, you can use free JConsole over here. So what you need to do is you just need to say local process, and I hope the font is big enough, but I can't increase it. What we need to do over here is I'm simply going to pick up an application which I like to connect. Okay, so I'm gonna say connect, and it's saying insecure connection. It's fine, right? So this is, you know, you are monitoring your application now. It's basically telling you, like, you know, memory and CPU usage, etc. We are not interested in that. What we are looking for is mbeans. Okay, managed beans. So in managed beans, one thing you will be looking here is org spring framework .boot. Inside you will have things called endpoints, and these are all the endpoints which are provided by Actuator. Okay, we already have health, as you can see. Yeah, you can say health get and unable to connect to. Yeah, it's basically saying status is down. Okay, but it's internally telling you what are the components which is showing, you know, why this application is down. You must be wondering, my application is up and running, but why my status is down? See, thing is, as far as your application is concerned, it's running in JVM. It has started successfully, but it's not ready for business. What does that mean? Let's say your application depends on some external systems. You know, it could be as simple as a web service for some reference data, or it could be like, you know, some sort of external database, messaging system, or anything XYZ. If your application itself cannot talk to those external systems, you know, you are basically publishing saying, you know what, I am not up for business just yet. This is the power of Actuator, that you can hook in, you know, your own business logic and say, look, yes, application is started, but I'm not up for business. So, you know, the people who are managing your application using load balancers, F5 or whatever load balancer is used, they would not send the traffic to this particular instance. They can stop and they can send the traffic to all the instances which are showing health as up. This is how you actually deploy, you know, application as well, but that's a different topic altogether. Okay, so this is how you monitor using JMX. You can see there are several endpoints available over here by default on JMX, but on HTTP only health was available. However, you can enable all these endpoints using HTTP as well. Okay, I'll show you in a minute. One thing which I just shown you over here, let's go back to our Postman. If I hit Actuator/health, okay, and if I say send, one thing you may have noticed, over HTTP, I am only getting aggregated health status, like status is equal to down, but I don't know which component or which service is internally down, which is, you know, giving this or kind of, you know, adding into this aggregated status. On JMX, we could see that, right? On JMS, you were able to see that, okay, one of the components called JSS was showing a status down. So couple of things I want to show you over here. One, you can have this detailed information on HTTP as well. Also, I like to tell how you can actually add your own business logic and provide your information to Actuator/health endpoint. Okay, so let's start with how to add a component or your own business logic. So what I did, I created something called a class JSS health indicator. It's a normal Spring Boot Spring Bean component, okay, it implements health indicator, which is a marker interface given by Spring Boot Actuator. As soon as a class implements this particular interface, you are now kind of hooked into the Spring Boot Actuator framework. Whenever somebody calls from outside, Spring Boot Actuator will be checking the health indicator, whichever class or component is implementing this particular interface, and it will be giving you the aggregated health. You notice on line number 16, what I'm doing right now is I'm giving health down in all cases. That is the reason my health is coming down over there. So if I put this as up, okay, and restart my application, and if I go back to this particular endpoint, actuator/health, now it should be showing, okay, it's showing down still. Let's try to understand why it's still showing down. Reconnect, connect. Okay, looks like our application is not fully up yet. Okay, I think this is the right time we add something, we enable additional information for our HTTP, because for some weird reason my JConsole is not able to connect to the local JVM. Okay, I think we anyways wanted to do that. That's probably the right time. So what you're gonna do for that is you head back to your application.yaml, you type management, okay, and then you say health, endpoint health show details. By default it comes as never, because of security reasons you probably do not want to do that, but you can enable it. Okay, there are three options. You can say always, or you can say when authorized. So because I'm not going to add a security module just in this video, so I'm gonna go with always. Okay, perfect. Let's start our application. And now if I hit the endpoint, I should be able to know why my application is showing down. So as you can see, it's saying our component JSS, which are our own created bean, it's showing up. Disk space is up, ping is up, Redis is down. Aha, because I have a Redis dependency in my project and my Redis server is not running at the moment. That is why my application's overall health is showing down. Okay, so I can do two things. I can either start a Redis server, or I can remove the dependency, but that's not the point. Let's just ignore that for time being. But I think that was a good good learning over here, that how you can enable details and how you can monitor which component is actually down. It's really powerful stuff. All right, so now one more thing I like to add over here before we move on. You notice one thing. By default we are accessing actuator on port 8080. That means external clients will be able to invoke this endpoint, right? Because 8080 is your default port. Okay, now here is a security concern, because not only you can access internal health, but there are many other things you can access using actuator endpoints. Plus you can manage as well, and you do not want to expose that type of management to external clients. So what shall we do? Two things you can do. You can either apply some sort of security module on actuator health endpoints. Okay, so means whoever is authenticated and authorized would be able to access actuator. Second thing you can do is you can change the port where actuator endpoints are published. This is the most common used practice, because what you're doing is you can divert your traffic. Okay, only 8080 will be coming in from external world, but anything else can only be accessed from internal intranet basically, or your own network. Okay, VPN based network or whatever that is. So how do we change the port? Let's do that. Go back to your you don't have to start two servers, by the way. Okay, that's the beauty of Spring Boot Actuator. What you simply need to do is you come back to your management. Over here you can simply say management server port, and I'm going to use port, let's say 9090, which is very different from 8080. Okay, now I should be able to cut down traffic for 9090 from the external world, but only, you know, maybe from the internal applications. If I restart my application now, so my application is starting. Okay, it's listening on port 8080. Okay, it should be showing somewhere here, but we'll prove it in a second. But if I go back to actuator now, if I try to hit 8080 actuator health, not found, because we have removed everything from port 8080. Port 8080 is still running. Okay, because if I go to 8080 v1 products, if I say send, there you are, because I'm servicing, you know, product details, but I have stopped taking traffic for actuator. Boom, gone. How do I access it now? Simply say 9090. There we are. We have now very successfully moved our traffic or actuator endpoint traffic from port 8080 to 9090. Okay, that's really powerful feature over here. Second thing, what we wanted to do, okay, let's try to enable rest of the endpoints which we are looking on JMX over here in our HTTP, because now we have kind of, you know, migrated traffic, so it's much more secure. So how we can do that? Spring Boot Actuator actually allows you to, you know, it has something called, you know, what we call whitelist and blacklist, allowed list or blocked list concept. Okay, you can either say, you know, expose everything, or you can say, you know, selectively only enable this thing, or, you know, block certain endpoints. Okay, we're gonna look at everything. So what you want to do over here is you come back over here, you simply type endpoints. Okay, and inside endpoints enabled by default, okay, endpoints web exposure include, you can pick up one thing at a time, or you can simply say all, which means asterisk. If I say all, let's see what happens with this. Earlier we were only seeing 3 endpoints, one actuator itself and then 2 for health. Yeah, if I hit the endpoint now, you will notice everything which I was seeing on JMX is also now available on HTTP port. Okay, so what do we have? We have several things. You know, we have by default beans. You can see what beans are available in your application. You know, you can check caches, health, info. Okay, conditions and config props, environment, loggers, blah blah, all these things. Quite a few things. You know, you can also add your own endpoints, by the way. Yeah, and important thing is, like, you know, when you add several services, you know, such as Redis or some sort of metrics, Prometheus, etc., they by default, you know, have some sort of plugins which you know, publishes their own internal health on actuator. Okay, so as you start adding new libraries, new frameworks, you may notice that a new thing has been added. If you do not want to expose it, you can use the concept of, like, you know, selectively include or exclude. All right, so let's go back to our presentation, what we have done so far, just to do. So what we done, we enable our actuator. Okay, we looked at several endpoints which are given by actuator. We did monitoring using HTTP as well as JMX. Now let's move on to the next bit, which is loggers. Spring Boot Actuator includes the ability to view and configure the logs, the log level of your application at runtime, basically. You know, you can check, okay, you know, show me, you know, what is the logging level of maybe some sort of Java Bean or controller or maybe some library, right? You can view either the entire list or an individual loggers configuration. Okay, so let's try to do that. So how do we do that? If I now come back, let's close that. Okay, just notice over here we have something called actuator/loggers. So if I hit that, okay, and if I just say send, it is showing me all the so entire list of all the frameworks, Java classes, beans, and whatever else which has some sort of logging enabled for them. Okay, so you can see the root is basically error. Okay, and for org Spring Framework, it's basically only error. Rest is null. For our own application com.sagu, it is set at trace level, but for eShop package, it is set at info level. Okay, because this is controlled in the application.yaml. So if I take you back to my application.yaml, you can see my logging level for root was error, eShop DAO was debug, eShop controller is info, eShop itself is info. Okay, and these are groups. I have another video which basically tells you how you can configure loggers and how to basically use logging in Spring Boot application. So please do watch that. All right. So one thing which I said in the beginning, you can actually change the logging level of your application. Let's try to do that. At the moment, my product DAO publishing information on info level. It's on info level at the moment. Okay. Let's add one more thing for debug level. Calling service to get products, and I'm just gonna put this is debug. Okay, and the above one is info. Anyways, it's already printed over here, but again, I'm just adding it to make it kind of unique. If I restart my application, you will notice a couple of things. Okay, let's clear our console. Okay, and go back to our Postman, and let's try to access our web service 8080 v1 products. So when I access the service, I can see two things got printed over here, info level as well as debug level. Reason being because I am actually saying that, okay, for this DAO class, print everything on trace, which means trace, debug, info, error, blah, 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 all these things. Maybe by mistake I had debug enabled, but I don't want to have this in production. What I can do now is I can actually change the logging level of my application at runtime. That's it. Let's try to do that. Okay, so our package name is com.sagu eShop DAO. So you can actually now go to Postman. Okay, and over here you can say, using the post method, you can say actuator loggers for this particular package, please change the logging level to error. Let's start with error. Okay, then nothing will be printed. If I send now, it's saying okay, 204, no content, which is fine, but at least hopefully the logging level has been now applied. So if I try to access my product application one more time, earlier you noticed we were printing both info, debug. If I clear the console now and hit my service, even though I've got the data, but did you notice one thing? Nothing is getting printed over here because my logging level has now been applied. Okay, so this is how you can change the logging level of your running application. You can change from error to whatever you want below that, info, debug, trace, whatever. Or if you have something low level running, you debug your application for 5-10 minutes, you can bump it back to error level. Okay, so you don't kind of create too many logs in your in your log files. Very, very powerful feature. However, you have to be a bit careful that you don't make changes which can basically crash your application or can have some different type of side effect which you don't understand. So you have to be extra careful. That is the reason by default these things are not enabled in HTTP, because JMX again will be only available to privileged users, and they probably know what they are doing. Okay, but as soon as you enable on HTTP, anybody in your team should be able to access it. Again, depends, like, how you are allowing people in your team to access production application. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, we done loggers. Metrics. Spring Boot Actuator provides dependency management and auto configuration for Micrometer, okay, which is an application metrics facade that supports numerous monitoring systems such as Prometheus, Dynatrace, JMX, Elastic, and there is, like, maybe another list of 8 and 10 application it supports. I'm not going to talk about metrics because I have a dedicated video for how to monitor and check metrics of your application. I'm gonna give you a link, so please do watch that. It's quite interesting. Okay, and we can skip that chapter for now. Next section is auditing. So once Spring security is in play, even though we did not enable Spring security, let's say if it's in play, Spring Boot Actuator has a flexible auditing framework that publishes events by default, authentication success, failure, and access denied exceptions. This feature can be very useful for reporting and for implementing a lockout policy based on authentication failures. Like, so you may have seen on some websites, if there are 3 login failures, or somebody is trying to try to access your application and that service is not authenticated and authorized, you can block that, okay, by hooking in Spring Boot Actuator, saying, okay, look, if there are 3 or 5 failures, okay, you want to block that, or you want to send some sort of event, you would like to trigger your security teams to saying, look, what, somebody is trying to access it. Auditing can be enabled by providing a bean of type audit event repository in your application's configuration. Okay, pretty much same as we saw earlier for health indicator. Okay, next thing, HTTP tracing. The HTTP trace endpoint can be used to obtain information about the request response exchanges that are stored in the HTTP trace repository. Again, this feature can be enabled by providing a bean of type HTTP trace repository. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video on Spring Boot Actuator. Okay, I'm going to share the code on sagu.uk, but main thing is do play. Okay, enable Actuator in your application and try to play with several properties. It's very powerful framework given by Spring Boot to monitor your application in production. Please give me your feedback and subscribe to channel, because I'll be uploading more interesting videos on Spring Boot and Java frameworks. Okay, thanks for watching.